Well, I first started here as an admin assistant, basically to cover 6 months maternity leave. I was straight out of college, but each job that I went for, they wanted basically you to have office experience, of which I didn't have any because I was straight out of college. So I thought, well, if I can get the 6 month maternity cover job, then that will get me some experience. They were hesitant about employing me. I had to go through 2 interviews, basically because of my age and obviously it being a prison full of, at that time, determinate male prisoners. So on the second interview, basically all the test was to how I coped walking past the exercise yard, and obviously a chat with head of business management at the time. But needless to say, I passed that second interview and then got a job in September. And then the following February, I was asked to go for a promotion to admin officer, which I did until it closed in 2013. So come in, depending on what office I worked in, is when I came in to to cover maternity period, I was on the switchboard, and so that was just opening post, processing post, taking phone calls into the prison. Then when I got to work in the custody office, that's when I got my promotion. That was basically calculating sentence dates, release dates for prisoners, basically accounting for how many prisoners you unlocked in the morning, how many prisoners you locked up at night, the arranging of the transportation of prisoners in and out to other establishments, and obviously receiving them in from other establishments, police fines, court fines, home detention curfew, ROTLs, which is release on temporary licence. Then I did cover cashier's office for a bit, so that was obviously taking in money, putting the valuable property into storage, ordering stuff for them. But I just sort of basically covered that whenever there was relief needed in that office. And then when we re-rolled to a life of prison, I headed up the setting up of the offender management unit because no one else basically wanted the job. So I did that on my own for quite a few months before I got people on board. Obviously it had loads of new systems to implement. The whole of the establishment basically didn't really know what to do about lifers and how to sort of manage them, how to manage their sentence, what it entailed. So steep learning curve. And then, so I did that for, like I said, a few months on my own, and then eventually people got on board. And then the new offender management role came in, which meant eventually there was basically 4 case administrators, which is the title that I eventually had. And then you used to work with offender supervisor, which was either a prison officer or a probation officer. I was teamed with one officer at the beginning for many years, worked really, really well between us two. And then I did get a seconded probation officer assigned to me. And then it was okay working with her, but working with Rishi was a lot better. And then, like I said, it closed in 2013, and I did that up to that time. But I did cover audit, I did do audits around the prison and in-house training with the computer.
Wow.
But as they implemented like new computer packages, I sort of went and delivered the training for that. So it's varied. At the time, I wouldn't let things get the better of me, if that makes sense. Yeah. I kind of like had that enthusiasm and stuff, and I was like, right, this is something new, I'm going to get my head around it, and I want to do it properly. But obviously you came up across loads of obstacles and stuff regarding like resources, people's understanding, people's knowledge of the system, and just sort of like trying to educate people. In my role, you basically had to go, sort of like organise all the different departments to communicate with one another and to work with one another. Only one that sort of, well, I'm not saying there wasn't other bad things, but one that stands out in my mind.
Okay.
And that was, as soon as I walked into the gate one morning, I thought there's something not right here. And I walked up to the gate where you draw your keys from, and I said to the OSG, operational support grade, behind the desk, and I said, what's happened? And he pointed to a note on the, the glass pane at the front, and a prisoner had hung himself and had been found that morning. So no wonder why the prison was quieter, because obviously it's a community in mourning, because it's one of their mates, however you want to describe it. It's somebody in their community died, which I suppose is just the same as being on the out. So that was quite a bad day. It wasn't pleasant to work in. The only other thing I can think of is when the prison officers went out on strike. Normally I would have the news on in the morning, but I must have missed it. And then I had a text from a friend, and she said, the prison officers are out on strike. And I was like, right, and I was like, are you still going in then? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, right, okay. So, really difficult position. Obviously, your colleagues are outside on a picket line, and you're thinking, do I make the decision whether to cross the picket line or not? So, a few of us did. Again, silence around the whole prison, and it was really weird walking around knowing that it's just you and the inmates, no prison officers. And to some extent, I know this sounds weird possibly to anybody else listening to this, but I felt sorry for them, because effectively they were being taken hostage themselves. So basically they had to rely on a group, I was going to say predominantly female. Nearly everyone was female, including any female governor grades down to sort of us minions on the ground, and basically had to go around and serve their lunch, serve their dinner, and then we basically had to go down to the kitchens and do the work that prisoners would do, like clean up after serving meals and everything. So that was an odd day. I wouldn't say it was difficult or it was bad, it was just odd. It's more of a curiosity as to why people want to come in, I think. Some people just love it for the history, and yes, they see life as that they didn't know, but I don't think in some ways Joe Hastles reflects it properly. A museum, you think, is a collection of old artefacts, things on display. We don't have any old artifacts really on display here, and I say we. It's not me. It's not mine anymore. Yes, I suppose you could say it's a museum. It's old buildings. It's got history. It's like various, obviously, information is contained up around the walls. I just don't class it as a museum. Yes, I class it as a building heritage that should be preserved, and respect paid to it, because of what's happened, what's taken place here. Having come back and having the knowledge that I have and the way that I was able to talk to the visitors and pass on my knowledge to them, I often felt looked down, or not looked down on, but disdain from my other colleagues or former colleagues. Yes. I don't get it. I will never understand it in all my time. I want to say, is it the bad boy thing? But that goes beyond an extent of bad boy. That's like...
It's criminal.
Yeah, exactly. That's worse. That's not just a bad boy. But I had one prisoner. We used to do a lot of, not bartering, but a lot of dealing with Leyhill prison. So if I had a prisoner that, say, got Cat D conditions, and he wanted to go to Leyhill, then I had good working relationships with the guys at Leyhill, and say, oh, can you take like, this one wants to come to you, will you take him from me? But it also worked the other way, in the sense that if they had a prisoner that had failed in Cat D, then they would get on the phone to me and say, Emma, we've got such and such a situation. Do you have space to take one? What have you? Anyway, so one day I got this phone call to say, Emma, we've got a prisoner who's been out on release on temporary licence, and he's won the lottery. Will you take him? I said, yeah, okay. That's the closest thing I'm ever going to get to a lottery ticket, is that it was obviously bagged and sealed down in security, and I held it. That is the closest I'm ever going to get to one. Anyway, so we had this prisoner come into us, and he was dull as dishwater. My lifer manager at the time had to take him out on an escorted absence, which basically is just release for a day, and it's just to sort of like, if they've been in for a long time, it's just to get them sort of like familiarised with the outside world, because they may not have used public transport, the currency may have totally changed, obviously the world changes in a long period of time. So anyway, so he'd been in for some time, quite prolific, serious cases, and so he had to take him out for the day. So when my lifer manager came back, I said, oh, so how did today go? And he went, that man is dull as dishwater. He said he's got all this money, all he wanted to do was walk around and look in charity shops. But this guy, the amount of mail that he used to receive from women, because let's face it, working in the prison service for all those years, there's not a lot that you don't get to see. We used to like laugh in the office, not very professional really, but you'd get a prisoner's case in, and you'd read the file and everything, because you would have to go down and see them on the wing within 3 days of them arriving at the prison. Some members of staff would not want to know what a prisoner had done, whereas I would get the file on my desk. I didn't have a choice in it anyway, but I would read it, because knowing that I had to go down and see the prisoner within 1, 2, 3 days time, I wanted to know what he was all about and what exactly I was dealing with. If he was a liar and lying point blank to my face, then I sort of like, got you, mate, or, oh right, okay, maybe you are sort of like honest, like being truthful, but so quite often a file would come across the desk and I'd go, oh, I just got a common law garden murder here, and then another case would come in and you go, oh my god, I thought I'd read it all now, but Jesus Christ. So you got to the stage when nothing would actually shock you. And then, I mean, there were some cases that were pretty sort of like more hard hitting. I mean, I can think of 2 cases, especially, no, 3, 4 cases especially, which won't ever leave my mind, the images that I saw. So, or just dealing with them in person and what they did. But I often used to sort of think, thank God I have to walk home, because from the time of leaving here to by the time I got home, that walk, I was fine when I walked through my door at home. You just sort of like, just processed it, relaxed a little, and just sort of thought, no, that's just another day. I mean, we always had a vulnerable prisoners unit, well, until we rolled to a life prison, but when we had to terminate, C-Wing was the VPU. So there was a lot of sex offenders, obviously with children and stuff. And I can remember there was one summer, and my sister was letting my niece do something, and I sort of had to say, can you please put a top on my niece? And she was like, and she couldn't understand why was getting so het up. But then she didn't understand what my work involved. She didn't understand where I was coming from. Hundreds of years ago, yes, it was. Yes, there is still suffering of a different kind within the prison service. I mean, obviously it still has its problems, but to me that's a a very old view. Yes, like I said, it still exists within the prison service, but there can be some positives. I think I read in the press or something on Facebook yesterday or past couple of days, and some prison is encouraging, or they're sort of like, as part of a rehabilitation program, they're getting them to go out and do fishing. And people, and I didn't read the article because I just saw the headline and thought, I can't be bothered to read that, all of the kind of like negativity towards it. And I can understand that from a public's opinion, because they don't know what happens. They don't know the system, they don't understand it. I mean, people come up and say to me, how many times I've been asked the question, what does life mean? And I have had to explain it to them that, well, technically it does mean life, but actually it doesn't. And then when I have to like explain how it works, and they're like, oh my god, a real eye-opener for them. Nobody sees what goes behind closed doors, which is in part of a way it's good that you've got the public coming in so they can see, but then I might be wrong, but they get the stories of the bad things that used to happen in here, not necessarily of what positive things can be done in here. What the hell am I going to do?
So was this in 2013 this happened?
Yeah,
2013.
Yeah, in January.
So two suits came, so there's a couple of suits came down from London.
Yeah.
And just in the chapel.
Yeah, and then announced that the prison was closing as a part of the closure measures. I mean, we were, what, one of 8 or one of 9 or something like that.
It was quite
it was quite like a big programme. So by the time I got back to my desk by like 10:30 that morning, I was on the phone to Mum. My manager came up to me and said, are you sure you're alright, Emma? And I was like, yeah, I'm alright, like really trying to keep hold of it together. Phoned my mum to tell her, and I was like, don't cry, Mum, or else I'll be off. And then it was like, Emma, can you start arranging your first transfer out? So I had like a caseload of 49, 50 prisoners. And by that lunchtime, 12 o'clock, the day that it was announced we were closing, I'd already arranged for the first of my prisoners to be transferred off out to another prison. And all of their staff will agree. I mean, we closed, I can't remember when our last official prisoner left us, but it was like about a week, it was the last week in March? Because we always have our reunion at the end, and all of us agree that we'd never work so hard to do ourselves out of a job. Eventually I did go and get a transfer over to Guy's Marsh, but it was like I did 10 hours on my working week, and I was knackered, to be frank. I couldn't drive, so I was reliant on other people, so I took redundancy. It was the last thing I wanted to do. Going back to what started me on that scheme of thought was when they announced it, we had, so you know where you go down the stairs down towards the governor's office, and then you've got like the two, what they used to call holding cells, but now know that there were sort of like cold larders, what have you.
Yes.
In that area, so basically in the stairwell there, that was where all the museum artefacts were. So there was a board of all the governors, 2 wooden boards above the gate going through into the old gate lodge, with a list of all the prisoners' names and their serving dates and stuff. And there's pictures all the way down the walls, downstairs. They had an old, really old lavatory seat down there, which was really ornate actually. I think if I can remember rightly, it was like blue and white, really pretty.
Amazing.
If you can call a toilet seat. Let's face
I'm sure
it.
we can.
And then there was, what else did they have? They had like other stuff on the wall, going back to sort of like old-fashioned punishments.
Yeah.
I don't think I might be wrong, say that they had a straitjacket or just old cuffs or old sort of like whipping instruments and things like that. Well, all of that got taken out and got shipped out to Taunton, which I was horrified at. At the time, we weren't quite ever sure where it went, but Taunton was put in the frame that that's where it went. If every time I got asked that question, if I got £1, I would not need to work here.